It sounds like Danielle Smith is tired of David Eby.
Specifically around David Eby, the Premier of British Columbia. You had some very, very, harsh words for him today. You called him un-Canadian in his opposition to this pipeline. Is that not going too far? I mean, can't someone have an opinion that differs than yours on what economic growth looks like in this country and still very much be a Canadian?
Well, I would just ask you to look at his video, which I think stepped over the line. I mean, it is fine to disagree. I try to find ways in which we can find common ground, and we've got lots of common ground. We've worked together on trying to advance ammonia export. I support his LNG projects. We have biodiesel that is produced in our province that is destined for the BC market. And we've talked about interties and how we would be able to support each other on that. We have a difference of opinion on this, and I do think it's unconstitutional. It has been determined by the courts that these kinds of things, trade and commerce, as well as ports and interprovincial infrastructure, are federal issues. And the reason for that is that we can't have a single parochial province blocking the aspirations of another. That's not how we were supposed to function as a country. So it is the very definition of what Canada is that we work together on these things. And so I was disappointed to hear his comments, but in the end, it's up to Mark Carney to make the decision on that. And so that's why I'm working with the Prime Minister.
And I do understand even characterizing what he said as unconstitutional because of your belief, and I think the Constitution backs it up, that this is federal jurisdiction. But calling him un-Canadian is a very specific way to describe someone who disagrees with you fundamentally on one issue around economic development. Why go that far, and what purpose does it serve?
Well, it was the whole point of why we're having the conversations that we are about tearing down internal trade barriers and finding new markets. It's because we're all facing a threat from our greatest friend and trading partner, the United States, and the instabilities created that Donald Trump has created in our relationship here. And so we have signed agreements, both among the Western premiers as well as among the national premiers, that will work together to develop economic corridors that include all of the above. It doesn't say we're going to include everything except the products produced in Alberta. And so I would say that the will of the people of Canada is that they want their leaders to work together to try to find those export markets. It's very obvious to me that the best opportunity that we have to find new markets is in Asia. And the way you get to Asia is you have to get your products to the west coast of British Columbia. And so that's the reason why we've identified that, along with those who are advising us, as the best opportunity for us to be able to develop those markets. And I would hope that he would agree and that he would work with us on it.
Do you think he's going to do that when you call him un-Canadian for presenting an opposition at this juncture?
You know, he began it, and I hope he dials his rhetoric back, because I'll be very frank about what I think of premiers who are trying to block other premiers from getting their products to market. So I would say that I think he went a little bit far yesterday. I hope he's regretting it. I know he's been ratioed quite badly on his video, which is a suggestion to me that he's not expressing the views of British Columbians. When we've done our own polling on this, we found that 75% of Canadians do want to see new pipeline access built. And there's only a couple of places that you can go when you're building new pipelines if you want to stay within Canada. One is to the East Coast, one is to the West Coast, and the West Coast just makes the most sense.
And I do understand, like, he deserves challenges over the rhetoric he's employed, and I found, listening to you in response until today, you weren't matching it in a commensurate way. You were, it sounded like, trying to dial things down and, maybe even attempt some sort of conversation. When did that switch, and why?
I would just encourage you to listen to his words. And so I calibrate on the basis of that. But the main thing is, this isn't his decision. This is a decision for the Prime Minister. And the courts have affirmed that as well. So he can, I think he can maybe express his view all he wants, but he's not the ultimate decision maker. I think the decision making comes down to, does the project make sense for Canada? And it does. And we're going to be able to demonstrate that.
Do you not, though, have some empathy as someone who has so voraciously defended things that you feel are in the province's jurisdiction? If I think back, for example, to you or your predecessor, your Jason Kinney, talking about carbon pricing, even when the courts determined that that was an issue where the federal government had jurisdiction, you pushed back and said, no, I feel like this is not in the best interests of my province. David Eby, is he not, despite your disagreement with him, entitled to push back on something that he feels is not in the best interest of people who live in his province? And once again, like, why does that make him un-Canadian? It just feels very far.
He's actively trying to block our ability to access the coast. I mean, we have international law. We have international law that says one nation is not allowed to block another. It's absurd that we would have one province blocking access to another. And yes, of course, and that's how I know that it isn't his jurisdiction. The TMX pipeline was challenged by previous premiers, and the courts determined that this is federal jurisdiction for a reason. Because if we're going to operate like a country, then we have to support each other. And I'm not feeling like Premier Eby is doing that right now. I think that if we're all going to be in this together, it means that when I go south, I talk about germanium and LNG and all of the things that BC has to offer, which I do. I talk about autos, I talk about steel and aluminum, because that's what we're supposed to be doing right now if we're going to operate as a country that supports each other. And I would just like to see the same in return.
Isn't he allowed, though, to consider other interests, right?
He's
like that's what I'm saying. You're ultimately saying it's Mark Carney's decision, it's the Prime Minister's decision. So why isn't David Eby allowed to say, hey, I have these constituencies who don't feel like this is necessary. I do feel like getting rid of the tanker ban will have a negative impact on some of the investments we want to see. Like that. I can envision if the shoes were on another foot, you doing the same thing, expressing the interests of the people of your province as you see them.
No, I've never talked about blockading this Trans-Canada Highway, so cart trucks coming in from the BC ports can't get through my province. I've never talked
saying that?
I'm just telling you, it's the
saying,
equivalent.
No,
I'm not talking about blockading the CN-CP rail line so that they can't get to BC. I'm not talking about turning off the gas pipeline that takes 5 BCF a day of BC gas through Alberta into the American markets. The whole point is that we have cross-border infrastructure that we all benefit from, and we have to make sure that we maintain that, because otherwise we aren't a real country. If we can't build cross-border infrastructure and we can't get our products to market, then we're violating what it is that the founders came together to build Canada in the first place. And so let's go back to the idea of what Canada is supposed to be. Let's get these kinds of projects built. Let's find new markets. Let's work together on that, and let's address the issues. Like you can't. The answer isn't no. The answer is, well, here's a particular issue that we need to consider, because every single project, whether it's his copper and coal mines, or whether it's uranium, or whether it's potash, or whether it's anything else, every single thing has an issue that has to be managed. And so we manage the environmental aspects, we manage the Indigenous consultation and equity ownership. And that's actually a more responsible and grown-up way to deal with it, is let's identify the issues, let's figure out how we can manage them, and then let's move forward on working on them together. And that's what I want to do with the Prime Minister. But again, it's the Prime Minister's decision.
She's absolutely correct. It does go against everything this country was built on to block another province. At the end of the day, I don't believe the Liberals have their priorities straight. And if a pipeline were to be on a list somewhere, it would be so far down the list that they would never actually get to it. Anyway, I would like to know what you think down in the comment section below, and have a good one.